Sure. So, as always in these things, I always have a main player that I want to speak about, but also, an honorable mention. So, my honorable mention I'll bring up first. Actually, both these players are known for their time playing in Montreal, which is kind of weird, given the fact that I'm a Leafs fan. But I was just looking back year by year, looking at the biggest waiver claims, and these two players stood out. The first one is, maybe a little bit lesser. It's Sam Montembeault. He was claimed by Montreal in 2021 from Florida, and that was like at the very beginning of the season. Actually, both these players were claimed at the very beginning of the season. You know, when you place a guy on waivers and you hope for the best, and he doesn't clear, and that's what happened. Montembeault was drafted third round in 2015, and since then he's played parts of 2 seasons for the Habs. And last year he wasn't great, I'll admit. So people looking at this guy is like the best waiver claim ever or in recent memory. I wouldn't necessarily say that. That's why he's an honorable mention, because he wasn't great last year. But this season, through 9 games, he's been pretty damn good, guys. He has a positive goal saved above expected. It's, 2.2 goals saved above expected. And through 9 games, he has a 297 goals against and a 908 save on a team that, frankly, isn't that good. So he's been fairly good for the Montreal Canadiens since they got him in 2021, again, as a waiver claim. So I thought that was a nice, easy, honorable mention.
Yeah, he was put into a tough situation last year, and it didn't turn out well for him. I remember he was part of what seemed like a goalie carousel last season, before the season, where everyone was just claiming goalies off waivers, and you couldn't keep up with which backup was where, and Comrie's going to the Devils, then back to Winnipeg, and snip snap. It's like all over the place. So yeah, he was definitely one of those. And with Carey Price, he got to play quite a few games, Montembeault, but yeah, definitely working out for him so far this year.
Yeah, this year's been good. I mentioned last year because he was one of, I think, 5 goalies to play for Montreal last year. They had him, Price, McNiven, I think Primo, maybe a guy or another 2 guys. So they had a ton of goalies play for that team last year, and again, they weren't overly good, so you can't really hold it against the guy. But this year, like we've said, on a team that is still sort of struggling and is giving up a lot of quality opportunities, he's been pretty good.
I was actually blown away by how good his numbers have been, and I stumbled across them one day editing my rosters in NHL, and had to give him a nice bump because he's been great in a small sample size. And I honestly, I was so surprised. I thought Jake Allen's numbers would have been better. Just, it seems like he's had so many nights this year where it's like, oh my God, we're messaging Allen in the group chat, and Allen has been standing on his head tonight, and here's 20 saves in the first period, 45 on the night, whatever. But he's playing a lot more games, and the team is not quite there yet. They're going through their rebuild, obviously, although they've been a lot of fun to watch. But Allen is getting the bulk of the games and facing a lot of shots and against the better teams, and so his numbers haven't been as good. But yeah, no, good for Montembeault, obviously a Quebec kid. We've seen what that can do to certain guys, that kind of pressure. Jonathan Drouin, unfortunately, is a guy that comes to mind. But no, man, he's taken an opportunity here with them for sure. It's nice to see.
Yeah, okay, so the player I actually wanted to talk about as maybe one of the best waiver claims in recent memory, at least in my opinion, is Paul Byron, also to the Montreal Canadiens, like I mentioned. So he was claimed in 2015-16 by Montreal from Calgary. He was actually drafted in the 6th round by Buffalo, though, prior to that. He was 26 at the time, and he was making league min when he was claimed. The year prior, he had 6 goals, 13 assists for 19 points in 57 games, so he wasn't setting the league on fire, but there was some potential there, even as a 26-year-old. The problem was, for Paul Byron and the Flames, is that he had a sports hernia surgery in the offseason prior to the 2015-16 year. So after training camp, it was sort of uncertain what was going to happen with him. And, I think there were some questions around his health. So they placed him on waivers at the very start of the season, indicating that he didn't make camp. And Montreal swooped in and picked him up right away. Since then, he's played parts of 7 seasons for the Habs. He scored 20 goals twice. He was actually placed on waivers 3 more times since then, but he signed 2 contracts now with Montreal over the span of that 7 years. The first one was 3 times 3.5 with Montreal, and the second one was 4 times 3.4. So essentially the same contract, and he's made a ton of money playing for Montreal, and he's been a pretty good depth scorer for this team, in the regular season and in the playoffs. So despite the fact that he hasn't played a single game this season because he's on LTIR and, the certainty of his future in the NHL is kind of up in the air, I thought, to get 7 or parts of 7 seasons from a guy on a waiver claim and to extend him twice, I thought that was really, really good value just for picking up a guy who a team, didn't believe in anymore.
Well,
so what do you guys think about Paul?
On top of that, he became he's like a cult player in Montreal, right? Like everyone loves him, and he's kind of like a fan favorite, I guess you'd say. And he has had some pretty monster years for them. Plays like a role player for them. Although in those 20 goals seasons, he was like first line for most of it. I have such a bad taste for Paul Byron because, when you have like one interaction on the internet and it ruins a player for you because of their fan base. Well, I ran into a thread that I don't remember the exact specifics, so it's not going to be, totally fair here for me to rip on him. But it was that 2016-2017 season. He was having a great year, 22 goals, 43 points. And Kopitar had his worst season of his career. He had 52 points in 76 games. I don't remember the exact reason why they were comparing them, but it was something like Kopitar was going to be an all-star, and Montreal fans were saying Paul Byron is better than Kopitar. Why isn't Paul Byron an all-star? Or why isn't Byron going to the Olympics? It was something weird like that. And they're comparing his play to Andrei Kopitar. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I got so frustrated and so angry at Montreal fans reading comments and stuff that I have, for the last 6 years, disliked Paul Byron.
But you gotta love the story. Like, a guy who wasn't proven in Calgary gets claimed, has some very productive years in Montreal, and signs 2 massive tickets when he was making league min.
I'm not saying it's a bad story, and it's definitely a great waiver claim. This one worked out for Montreal. Like, when you can get a guy to be a career player for you, it's pretty great. But like, every time I see or hear Paul Byron's name, I'm like,
That's funny.
That's hilarious and ridiculous at the same time. He was really good there. Like, one of those guys that just a smaller guy, but with a lot of speed and great work ethic, and just would kind of fly under the radar, get you 20 goals, and have a great summer. See you later. And that's kind of what he did. And now, I think is he on LTIR now?
Yeah, he is.
So he's pretty much finished, and they're just letting that the rest of that contract run out. But yeah, during his heyday there in Montreal, he was really good for them for sure.
Yeah, he's on LTIR right now, and from what I read today, just doing some quick research about this waiver claim, is that it's kind of uncertain right now whether he'll return to the NHL. I know he's had a lot of problems. Yeah. I mentioned that sports hernia that he had, so who knows? He's only 33, but by the NHL standards, like, there's still plenty of guys who are doing it. Like, for Christ's sakes, like, Sidney Crosby is leading the league in 5-on-5 points right now, and he's 35. Not comparing the two case, just to make sure, so you don't hate me. But no, like, if he gets healthy, maybe he can come back and sign a league min deal. But the overall point was that they had him for 7 years, and he was a waiver claim. So I thought that was great value to be found there.